I just want to welcome you to this South Carolina Adopt-A-Stream database how-to session. We run these webinars about quarterly to address the additional questions that come once volunteers leave the training and realize, oh, I need to enter this data somewhere and I need to set up this site. And there's a lot of information at our trainings. Sometimes you just need a little bit more hands-on views. You might have specific questions. And if you do, I welcome you to please send them to the chat room. Emily Anderson here is our Watershed Project Scientist at the Center for Watershed Excellence. She'll be taking care of the chat room and any questions that are coming in as we go along. We really want this to be a very friendly, interactive session. So there's no question that you could ask that I think would be out of line, like you're too off the wall. So feel free to, don't feel silly. If you have a question, let's make sure we get it solved today. We have a full hour, so it's enough time to go through everything and more with our database, which has come a long way since it was launched in 2017. So I'll go ahead and get started. My name is Katie Callahan. I have the great pleasure of being able to co-lead the administration and leadership of the South Carolina Adopt-A-Stream program since we initially started laying it out in 2016. I've worked at Clemson now for almost 15 years, and this is one of the best projects that I've had the chance to get involved in, which is our statewide citizen science, water quality, and ecosystem monitoring program. And citizen science, y'all, is going to change the way that we manage our natural resources. And we had huge success in 2021 with active volunteers. You'll see more of that in our e-news, which hopefully you're signed up for. This is a very relevant program right now, and using the database and being able to quickly share that data with our public is truly important. We're in a day and age now where people are used to getting all of the data that they want or information that they need right on their phone. And so the South Carolina Adopt-A-Stream program hopefully helps make that happen, right? It democratizes citizen science. So at this point, let's make sure that everyone can see my screen. Great. I'm just going to move it over to my window. And again, Emily will be working the chat room over there if there's some kind of technical difficulty where you can't see the screen. But really, welcome to this webinar. And I also want to do a special call out because this is one of our first webinars where we have both freshwater and saltwater certified volunteers attending. So you have gone ahead and not only gotten one certification, you've gone ahead and gotten both. And I really appreciate and congratulate your interest and passion for getting out and collecting data on the waterways that you love. I also want to shout out, we have a couple fairly new trainers that are attending today. And our trainers are the face of the Adopt-A-Stream program across the state. Volunteers are as well, but really sharing this program and driving its energy. Where there are trainers, there are volunteers, and there are data, and you see that on the map right here in front of us. So let's go ahead and start to explore this database. You can see that I'm logged in up here. My window looks a little bit different than yours, and I will go ahead and change that view here very soon. But when you log in, you'll see that you're logged in the top right corner, and that is your user ID in the database. And
sorry, Katie, we're only seeing about a third of your screen here.
Okay. Is that better?
It has not changed.
Okay, let me try again.
Yeah.
I'm glad you spoke up. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, Rebecca Fanning commented in the chat. Thank you.
Great.
Oh, there we go. Is that better? It looks better too. Yeah.
Since Friday, we have had some technical difficulties around town. Thank you for telling us, Rebecca.
Yeah.
None of us here are perfect. So we've got the login up at the top right, and that is associated with your user ID. Typically, it'll show your full email address, and that is the number one issue that we have with the database is just getting that login set. So if all of you are here, and I believe that you're all certified from the list that I received today for attendees, you received that certification email that you needed to confirm your account and set up your password. And that truly is our number one database issue that we have, is getting that email in your inbox. And that email has changed. So for those who are not yet certified and are attending a volunteer training very soon, that you will get an email from sc-stream-l@clemson.atlas.clemson.edu, something along those lines. And that is your chance to confirm your account, set up your ID and your password. Now that ID is typically the one that you register with when you attend a workshop in the very beginning. So when you register for the workshop, that is the email address that we enter, and that email is one-to-one. So we've had it in the past where certain people have wanted to share an email, but they're both certified volunteers. We really encourage that. For every one volunteer, we have one unique email. Now, should your email ever change, which obviously some of ours do, at the very bottom, and my Zoom bar is kind of in the way here, but where it says need technical assistance, that's where you contact us and have your email address modified in the database, should that ever arise, or should you have any other problem. You can contact either Emily or myself. We'll put our emails in the chat room, or just go directly to that technical assistance button. Now, I love that we instituted this little box over here to the left to celebrate who are our most active volunteers. We see a lot of activity right now going along the coast, as well as in the Columbia area, which is great. You can go ahead and actually maximize that map very easily, be able to zoom in. So we'll go to some of those more active sites. We have our legend here. And the reason this legend exists is because if the city of Columbia wants to look up, well, is Adopt-A-Stream really working in our area? They can see that these blue sites are the ones to go to right away, sampled within the past 6 months. And right away, it'll tell you, is this a site that is rich with data? Does it have current data? Is it an active site, without having to click in too many clicks into the database? So hopefully that makes sense here. Then we have sites that might be available for pickup. So here we have one. Well, these aren't too old. Maybe a site that really could have been a good active site, has access, has the landowner permission, perhaps, that can be picked up. So there's a reason for some of these boxes and red balloons too, is really, can these sites be readopted? And if there's sites that have a long amount of data, but were dropped during COVID, that does happen, you might want to pick up that site because it has 30 past events and you can bring it back to life. So that's just using our map and going into each site. Now let's refocus. So as a volunteer, you've gone ahead and confirmed your account. The very first thing that you want to do after you set up your password and confirm your account is to establish your group. And we'll end up going through almost all of these. And maybe if we have time, I'll even show you some of the query potential that we have as a state team, and something that you might want to access for your areas and ask a trainer for assistance with. But we'll go through groups because you want to first set up a group. So very easily, all the blue buttons here are action buttons. I love that we can ascend, descend, sort by county, and see who are the active groups in the county. But we'll go ahead and add our group. So today we're just going to go through, we'll go through a webinar test group. Okay, and we are operating in Anderson County. Now the database is a smart database, although sometimes we complain that it might not be so smart in certain actions, but it wants to recommend options to you. Now when it recommends options, it's really just to cut down on the number of mistakes due to misspellings, just simple kind of human errors that can really lose data within this overall system. So if it recommends something that is correct and works for you, we ask that you please select it. We'll set our date as today. Our description of our group is our webinar test group. And we're not going to enter any monitored sites because we haven't gotten there yet. You're a new volunteer just using the database for the first time. And I'm going to have to add myself to that group. So I will use our Clemson Watershed. I'll go ahead and just add Emily, actually. Is that okay, Emily? And I have to add myself. Okay, so fairly soon in the next few months, you will see a change a little bit in this group structure where only those who create the group will be able to add other group members. But for right now, when you're setting up your group, you can add yourself to a group or you can add others to your group. Okay, so if you're a neighborhood and you already know that your neighbor has already confirmed their account, you can add them as a member. Okay, but if they have not confirmed their account, they're not going to show up. And so they can add themselves later to that monitoring group. Okay, let's go ahead and add our group. All right, whenever you see a green bar, that means that you've done something really great. So that green bar is success. Red means something didn't save, something went wrong. So the next stage, of course, is to add our site. So one thing I want to go over on this page is we have a number of records, lines going across records on this page. It's 25 per page. And if you wanted to see how many sites does the Adopt-A-Stream database have, you would have to basically multiply 25 times 20 and see how many are entered, or at least that's what is showing here. Instead, what you could do if you're looking for a certain site is to sort, recognizing that the very first sites, see how these numbers increase almost incrementally. They'll break up here and there, like we don't have a 1 that was deleted when we were maybe first testing some things out in the database. But every time a site is added, it goes up by 1 for the most part. So we can look at how many sites does the Adopt-A-Stream database have. And we have about 2,626. That's not totally true. You can see there's some gaps in between, but the next site should essentially be 2627. And that's the ID that the database truly recognizes when you hit that search for anything. So some of you should hopefully know where these letters come from in the site ID. And that comes from the water body name that's being used when the site is created. So let's go ahead and test that out. And for some, as we're going through this, I do want to mention that we try to avoid symbols in that water body name. We have a lot of unnamed tributaries. So you might want to label them by the number creek going up. But let's go ahead and give that a shot. So right now, my water body name is the Atlantic Ocean. So right now you'll see that big blue square. That's just 00 latitude and longitude in the middle of the Atlantic because my geolocation services isn't turned on. So if you want the database to know where you are when you're creating your site, which has a lot of conveniences, you can turn on your location services. And I'm not going to go through all of that right now, unless it's easy. Instead, we'll just pan over. So the benefit of setting up your site in the field, remember this is a web-based database. It's not an app that you're on. The benefit of using this and being just logged in on your phone and standing exactly where you're monitoring is it'll pick up your exact location. For us, we're going to go ahead and just pan over to South Carolina. Okay, we're going to pick this branch over here I want to make sure we can find it later on, the T. Ed Garrison Arena. Now, if I want to double check that location, make sure that oh yeah, that does look like my site. That's where I was planning on putting it. I can just double check that location if I'm not standing at the stream. So let's go ahead and put our little person, make sure that we're noting that it's downstream from the road or upstream. We can zoom in a little bit closer if you want to say, oh, that's not exactly on the stream, I'm going to move it. It's just clicking. Now, one thing to remember about this, that just if you're taking notes, the one thing you want to remember is if you go back later and edit your site, it's going to move that location. If you go to this window and you're editing, it'll move that location to wherever you're editing. Okay, so you'll have to always go back and reset this if you're editing anything in here. So we tried just to do this one time is really the bottom line here. So our water body name, we're going to get that from the Watershed Atlas because I don't really know. So let's head over in your training, you learned about the Watershed Atlas. And the reason the Watershed Atlas is so important, it's important for understanding our watersheds, but it's also very important for the Huck 8. Now we have Black rivers, Lynch's rivers in a lot of states. So if we just named everything federal on a federal level with the same river name, there would be a lot of confusion of the quality or flow of different rivers around the country. So instead, they're given basically a social security number, and that's called your hydrologic unit code. So, and what we refer to often in trainings, you might catch us as saying Huck without explaining what that is. So a Huck is a hydrologic unit code, and we are looking for that 8-digit unit code. So the 8-digit watershed is what they've updated the label to in the DHEC Watershed Atlas. A really great tool, by the way. So to get to it, you just type in DHEC Watershed Atlas. We'll bring you to this page. Click here, opens up a new window. You accept, and you're in. I will also add that you have a section on the Watershed Atlas within your handbook that takes you through all of these steps to getting that Huck 8 number and to exploring your database. Exploring your watershed in general. Okay, so let's get our watershed name and our Huck 8. So I've got to just find where we are. I thought that would be labeled there. Okay, we're going to just assume for our database, for our purposes here today, even though it's frustrating me not to have that exact information here for y'all, we're going to assume it's right around here. Okay, so we'll assume it's right there at Walker Road. Just for today, I'm going to go ahead and delete this site anyway. So since I didn't know the name of the stream, we're going to turn on our stream labels right here. So you see that towards the bottom left of the column, we can turn on our labeled streams. And that is going to help us avoid a lot of unnamed tributary to, which happens pretty often. So we can just call this the 6 and 20 Creek. And I'm glad that this actually worked out for me to show this, because if I type in 6 ampersand 20, I'm going to get S ampersand 20C as the beginning of my site name. A little bit complicated. So let's type it all out, avoid symbols. Now we have to choose our water body type. So you have options, and for us up here in Pendleton, we are looking at a freshwater site, but half of our attendees today are saltwater. So notice that you have saltwaters as an option. If you're up in the mountain region and you're in the upper Saluda or off on the Chattooga, one of my favorite places in South Carolina, you can choose trout waters from the list, but we'll go with freshwater for where we are. Unfortunately, we're not up that far in the mountains, so I'd like to be. And now we have to choose our HUC-8. And again, this is just our social security code for our watershed. Now, there's nothing on the map that's showing me what that is. And that's because I just have to make sure it's turned on. So it's the very first layer here is this national watershed boundaries. You expand it to show the 8-digit watersheds, turn that on, nothing changes, except for when you click, you'll get that number. And so we are in the Seneca River Basin, and we have to remember this long, complicated number, but at least we know it's the Seneca. So 03060101. And we'll head over and choose our watershed. So 03060101, and you choose the Seneca right here. Now this can get very abstract when you're in the coastal zone. So I'll say that for the saltwater volunteers. Watersheds are not as defined, right? You're not driving over big hills and mountains as you cross watershed divides. So that can be confusing. It can be modified easily by man-made changes, but just click the space where you are and use that number as your safe rule there. Okay, and we are going to enter our group name, which is our webinar test. And see, it's already giving me an option there. And anything gray in the database is already entered for you. There's no way that you should be changing that information. And our description is really mostly, is it downstream? Is it upstream? If there's something there at the site that you want to make sure you're noting it's above that pipe or access through the fence. Let's say this site gets picked up in a year by somebody else. So you might want to put instructions on how to get to that site. So we'll just say downstream of bridge crossing. Okay, and add that site. Easy as that. Now we have our name, and I'm going to write it down so that and you'll see why. 2633. So we did jump ahead quite a bit in numbering. Now, if I click edit, again, it's going to send me straight to 00 in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. So just to make sure everybody notes that. And you can see we did something good. We have it in green that we have our site confirmed. Now for you, when our next step is adding sampling events, and you're going to go out and be ready to add data to this database and show what you've learned and how you're contributing to our local science efforts, citizen science efforts. For you, this list of sites will only show you ones that you were associated with by your group. So if you're in 3 different groups, it'll show those sites that those 3 groups monitor only. It will not show you every single site that's ever been created in the database. It's just, I'm just lucky to see all that. So groups, one thing to note too is only 2 groups can ever monitor any one site in the database. And that way we just make sure that we're not putting all of our efforts into one location, right? So if you see a site that hasn't been monitored and 2 groups did own it and you want to pick that up, that's just something that we could help you modify as a team. Okay. All right, so let's go ahead. We clicked again, sampling events. So that's events is consider your monitoring event and add sampling event. Okay, and this is set up in a very easy tab fashion, and if it's on your phone, and I don't know if Zoom will let me show what it looks like on your phone. It'll just be things that open up, so boxes that expand. I'm not sure if I can show that in Zoom unless I was using a screenshot, I would imagine. So if you are using your phone or your tablet, the site just condenses and these boxes just expand for you. Okay, so let's go down to our site all the way down in the SA 6 and 20. See that quick little description came in handy that downstream of bridge crossing, because there were actually a few 6 and 20s, because of course that's a pretty big river for up here. It's called a creek, but for up here, it's pretty much a river. And there's going to be a number of monitoring stations there. Okay, so it already knows that we're the webinar test monitoring group. Now we want to collect a lot of information, but no more than necessary. We try to not mandate any kind of observations or data that we do not foresee using. And we really want to make sure that that's clear. But this information about how long we traveled and who was there contributes to our calculation of how much we're adding back to water resource management in the state. For instance, in 2021 alone, volunteers contributed over $35,000 worth of time, just time, not mileage, to the state's water resources management. And that tells an important story to legislation. It tells an important story to local county councils, and it's useful in grants for in-kind activities. So if you're a watershed organization and you want to calculate in-kind contribution, we can go back and calculate that from the database. Now for participants, we only list people who are certified in the program. So if you go out sampling with your church or with your classroom, we are not tracking all of the people who might have attended. We encourage you to bring them, especially if you don't have anyone that you're monitoring with. We always want safety in numbers, but we're not interested in who they are. We're just tracking who's a certified and active monitor. So I'm going to include Emily in here because we are in this group together and can attend. Now, we might have other members of the group and maybe not everybody can make it on the first Saturday of the month. So we're just including who's there that day. We'll go with our current time that we traveled, let's say 3 miles to the site. And it took us 45 minutes, which is a pretty good average for an experienced volunteer. The smallest amount of time is 15 minutes, and it does all that calculations based on how many people you entered in the participant list. So that's why that's important. All right, over in weather, though it has been sunny, we're going to go with rain just to show that. So this is going to change very soon. This should be in the last 24 hours, and you won't have that option for days. So really just go ahead and start entering data, rain in the last 24 hours. So I'm going to put half an inch. Whoop, that's 24 there. So this layout is going to change here in the next, I would say, week to show half an inch of rain in 24 hours. Now, a lot of people use Weather Underground as a reliable site, a reliable app for looking up weather data. It does really give you a good display on the past 24 hours. If you're interested in getting involved in more citizen science programs, we recommend Coco Ross. South Carolina actually has a lot of Coco Ross stations. It's run out of Colorado. And you can sign up, receive your rain gauge, and put that rain gauge if you're monitoring on your own property or friend's property. If you're, you can put that rain gauge out. Maybe if you're monitoring at a city or county park, ask if they would help promote more citizen science and put that rain gauge at your location. Then we'll jump to observations. Okay, so again, we're just going to tab through this, and everything that we are showing on the screen here follows your data sheet. So this is all things that we describe in the trainings, in the handbook, which is your total resource for information. As you go through, this should accompany you, right, to all your monitoring events. You're bringing your handbook. It should look really ugly and beat up within just a few monitoring events. So mine looks really gross. Bring that with you. We're going to normal. Was there algae? So oily sheen. So some notes that you can take during those observations. Now, if you click this site needs an organized cleanup and that there is concern for illegal dumping, and you click yes, that is going to send an alert to DHEC and to the center, as well as any city, county, or watershed organization that has signed up to receive those alerts. What's really handy is we can also send that to the local Keep America Beautiful group if we get that type of alert. So we want to remind you that your data, your observations has legs. But for the most part, we hope that your events are pretty boring, that the site, you just maybe picked up a couple cups from restaurants that I won't name in a recorded webinar, but pick them up myself along the road and at sites, and you just clean the site yourself. Now for the next two, if you choose anything other than natural here, such as milky white and such as anything but rotten egg, which is good, no longer listed here, these both will send an alert. So anything other than natural. So I don't want any false alarms. We are in the live database going out to counties or cities. So I'm going to choose natural, but please know, so we've got trash and illegal dumping sends an alert, watercolor and water odor, anything other than unnatural. Now we used to have rotten egg in water odor. And for all of our saltwater volunteers, you all know that that is very natural, right? You know, when you're headed down to Charleston and you cross that bridge, you smell the rotten egg, you are home. So that's just the natural smell. And tide direction, since we're in Pendleton, we're not going to click that, but very important as we, for the saltwater program and volunteers, as we start to sort data, because there's no bigger influence on water quality than tide. As we start to be able to sort data from incoming and outgoing, that we have that ability to track which data point is associated with which tide direction. And so I really say that to remind you that we do not collect anything that we don't feel like will be important or is important at that time. So even freshwaters can have choppy water conditions. These are associated with those up top. We're going to actually just go back to clear on that. Water clarity, that is covered in your data sheet as well as in your handbook. Why do we track all of these hazards and why is that important? So let's say that you do have an alert, you have a high bacteria alert, and the local DHEC Environmental Quality Control Office is going out and they're going to monitor. We just want to say, is there anything that people should know before they go out to that site? So that's all, just a few quick safety checkoffs. You might see tracks at your site. That's a great photo to upload when we have that additional photo. If you tracks, if you see some kind of mess on the ground and you're like, I'm not sure what this is, but I'm going to include it because just in case I get a high bacteria, you can add that photo there and click off any sources that you recognize. And then barriers to fish movement kind of goes along with stream habitat assessment, which we'll check in on, is how can we improve this site for its ecological value down, all again, potentially down the road. Now, photos, we ask you to take an upstream photo, a downstream photo. For saltwater, this should say SW. It did before, but right now this is just saltwater, and then that additional photo. And know that if you put a photo that includes you or others, there's a good chance we may use that photo. So it should be people who are all okay having their photo taken and uploaded. So just please remember that. When you upload that photo, it's not going to show right here on the page. So you didn't have an error. Just because it doesn't show, it's going to show in what we call the site profile page, and we're going to get over there pretty soon. So I feel like I should just reboot this whole screen, because before it was showing freshwater, saltwater, and all, and now it's showing me these numbers again. Weird, isn't it?
Yeah, that's so strange.
Oh, you all should not have this problem. Maybe it's a cookies issue for me, but if you do have this problem, please send me an email at kdca@clemson.edu. Okay, so bank full width, active channel width, these can be estimated. The stream is usually larger than you estimate, but we recommend that at least for one time a year, especially when you're conducting that stream habitat assessment, to bring a wheel, a measuring tape to go from one side to the other. And of course, that active channel width is the current elevation of the water reaching both banks. The bank full width is what can you tell about how high that stream gets during a regular storm event. Not our 100-year storm. And then depth to water is from the top of the bank of where you're standing until you reach that water level, about how far down is that. And so that's just important to see it so we can track any kind of stream incising, as hopefully we use this data for future watershed restoration projects. And is there a presence of flow after 3 days of dry weather? That's if you have an outfall or pipe that's coming into your stream and it hasn't rained in a week and that thing is running. Well, where's that water coming from? That's potentially an illicit discharge, someone tying in perhaps a stormwater pipe or a washing machine. Those are the things that we try to just track. A lot of times it's just HVAC runoff your stream. So if you feel it and it feels ultra cold, it could be that. So we'll just put that there's no outfalls present in the reach at all. All right, next tab is chemical, where again, I'm presented these numbers. That is, anyway, that just happened after I logged in. It's me. This is for salt water only, where the refractometer is calculated. For us in freshwater, we're going to click NA instead of no. A no would not allow you to proceed with your data entry for salinity. Of course, that's the purpose of the refractometer. So for us, we will click NA. We want to note, eventually some of these comment boxes are going to disappear and be grouped into another tab at the end. That's for an e-journal. So for those of you who like to take some notes on your site, some really great things that you observed or some changes at the site, you'll be able to track them in an e-journal versus all of these note boxes. And recognize that if you have an expired reagent and you check that off, which you should if you have an expired reagent, it will not allow you to proceed with data entry for that one parameter, but you can for the rest. But it will not, because of our data integrity and our quality assurance project plan, we want to make sure that we're presenting actionable data for local decision making, good baseline data, not regulatory data, but for someone else to follow up on. And we want that to be presentable, high quality. I say this at every training I run. Make sure that even if you are using a Fahrenheit only thermometer, you are entering your temperatures in Celsius. There's a table in your handbook that does that conversion for you, as well as you could just Google it, scratch your head and remember that calculation from middle school. But in the very beginning of this program, we had a lot of boiling rivers. So the most boiling rivers ever seen on planet Earth. So we really encourage you to enter the Celsius degree for those. And you see every time that we enter a test result, there's this gray box that gets completed at the end, and that is your reported parameter. So in the next example where we might enter a 6.5 and a 6. Well, we all know from using those colorimeters that you're not really getting a 6.6, that is averaging it for you. So no hard math. The database is going to average for you, and that you cannot alter that gray box at the end. And that's the reported value. Now, if you try to enter a 7, because of course or 67, you will get that heads up and alert that your readings are too far apart. So we all know that sometimes there's some in between on those colors when you're testing your pH. Now for DO, we're going to be at a healthy stream. But again, if I try to go outside of that precision that we expect between duplicates, that's part of our quality assurance project plan, it's going to give you a heads up. So when you're doing that DO in the field, you want to keep, unfortunately, if you're not close, use that fixed sample, retest, or retitrate and see if you get close to between all 3 of your results that you have. So we'll put in an 8.4. Sorry, that should be an 8.4. Thank you. And no salinity here, that's grayed out for us. No Secchi depth, that'll say salt water in your version of the database. and no transparency tube. Those are currently not a part of our freshwater monitoring kits, but expect more news about that in our future. But when you do, for those who are in the saltwater program, when you are entering Secchi depth, so let's say, of course, the saltwater program is all about location. So if you are on a dock and your water level is unattainable from where you're standing, it's a fixed dock, and you choose to use the Secchi disc and you don't have a current that's disrupting your readings, or you have a weighted Secchi depth, if you go and hit the bottom, it's going to ask you what depth to hit the bottom, and that will be its reported value. So we might say, and this is of course in meters, we can say 5 meters, and it's going to transfer over. Now, if you instead are using a transparency tube, which means you have access to the water surface, you're able to submerge that tube about a foot underwater, collect your sample, start to drain it out. Very fun activity. You have the great option of being able to add to turbidity data within our state, which we do not have a lot of turbidity readings. And in some states that's used in some regulatory decision making. But for us to address sediment in our waterways, you can't address what you don't have data for, right? So we're hoping that these kind of readings help contribute to the things that this program can modify, and your volunteer efforts can modify for our state's water resources and ecosystems. So instead, if I don't enter that number, 120 centimeters is the highest value. You'd have to have a super clear waterway to get that reading, but it'll report that and it'll modify your turbidity value. So that's all a built-in equation, and we'll just put a number in here just for fun. All right, now we have a section on additional tests, and that's because you might be taking samples out to a lab. You might still be using the conductivity meter. And if you are, we don't want to discourage you from doing that. This will be a way that you can track all of that information between custom tests and additional tests within your other data that you're entering at one location. Okay, if you're in the freshwater program, you are monitoring for bacteria. In saltwater, unfortunately, we don't have an easy to use kit for salt waterways that would give us Enterococcus readings, which is our recreational standard for bacteria. So we should be all using the 3M Petrofilm plates. Of course, that blank is going to be 0. If you enter anything other than 0, you will not be able to proceed with data entry. So something happened either in your pipette, or there's something wrong with your water source, but there's something unsterile there that will not allow you to proceed. So of course, all the hard math again is done for you right here. And you can enter your plate readings. All the math, the average times 100 is all done for you. You must enter your time. So we'll go from yesterday until today. We can put in our temperature, again in Celsius, and any changes. So that's our bacteria. We do have several macroinvertebrates, so chemical, freshwater, and macroinvertebrate monitors here with us today. And I'll just go ahead and show real quick. I just want so that we can show it in the site profile page. I'm just going to pick a few of these so that we can show what that looks like. So it does all the assessment for you based on what's been entered, and we can look at how it puts that bar chart together for you at the end. Okay, now stream habitat is very easy on your phone as well. You're just selecting the example. The description is here for you. We encourage our volunteers to conduct a stream habitat assessment 1 time per year, or whenever there are any major changes around the site, such as major construction, big storm events that washed out maybe a huge section of bank. We ask you to come back and redo that stream habitat assessment. We'll avoid it today You have to click here if you conduct the stream habitat assessment. We won't go through all of that, but if you're curious about it, we have a great new video that Emily and I just created. It's on our Adopt a Stream channel at resources and materials at scadoptastream.org. You can watch that video and it'll walk you through, in addition to these great graphics and categories. Thanks, Emily, for putting that link in the chat room. Very easy to conduct and really valuable information for the future of this program and your waterways. For the saltwater habitat, saltwater volunteers, you're really just going through and checking observations. Is the area of the salt marsh increasing, decreasing, the same? And what is the land use within 100 feet of each side of your waterway? Are you observing any impacts? That trash checkbox has been moved over to observation, so earlier in your data entry. And did you see anything else that you want to add to this list? So you can keep adding as you go along. If you're interested, of course, we can't teach all of that's an entire college course, is shorebirds. So alone. So if you are interested in tracking those species, you have the opportunity to do that right here in the database. Okay, so if I had started this data entry in the field, got my DO, got my pH, water temperature, did my stream habitat assessment and hit save as draft, I could incubate my E. coli. The next day, me or a member of my group could come in, enter that bacteria number, and then save and submit. We're going to go ahead and save as draft, actually, just so you can see what that looks like. Okay, and we were successful. Again, we did something well. So let's look at our most recent event and see where it says finalized. No. That means that we haven't finished that data entry, and we really want to make sure that that says yes for all of our sites. So if we want to go back, you can edit your data events. You cannot delete them, but you can edit them. So we'll go ahead now and save and submit, and we'll see that that's finalized right here. So that's been updated to yes. So what does that look like? And we'll go to a few different sites. This hyperlink will take you to a site profile page. And y'all, just want to give you a heads up that if you do have questions, now is the time. We'll start wrapping up my presentation to you today, but I'd love to hear any questions or things that you want to overcome when using the database. So if you are not a logged in volunteer, you can see everything, no matter where you are in the world, in our database, except for anybody's personal information, okay? But you can, from anywhere in the world, see where we're monitoring, how many monitoring events, when it was sampled, and what those results are. Now this, we are going to see some exciting changes in our data display in the next 6 months, where right now you can turn all of these on. And for only one monitoring event, this is kind of silly, but I want to show you the macroinvertebrate chart. But you'll be able to use a secondary y-axis and choose which ones are graphing on this bar and which ones are graphing on this bar, and do some really interesting, I think, data visualization. You can also, let's say you're monitoring upstream and downstream in a watershed. You're a watershed organization concerned with the 3 and 20, you have multiple sites and you want to compare their data over time. So we don't have that capability in our database just yet. I hope that one day we will, where you can compare upstream and downstream conditions. But for now, you can actually just select everything here. I'm going to Control C. Sorry. And you can walk through. It's not going to show that. I'm going to go over to the Excel, and I'm going to right click, paste special. Um, I lost it. It should say values pay special here. I'm going to go to text, click OK. And that has all of our scores for that table. Unfortunately, these need to be resorted out. But it does show, I think pay special must have changed. But it shows all of the values. And so you can put in, this site, your next site, you can track all of your data in a separate Excel. And create your own graphs, compare them as you like. So let's go back to our Zoom and go back to our database. And what I wanted to show here was our macroinvertebrate. So that you can see over time, when you're collecting your macroinvertebrate scores, you do really have a pretty cool way of tracking how your communities, your pollution sensitive, your pollution tolerant communities have changed at that stream. So pretty handy, I think, tool to display over time. So there's richness and depth in how much you monitor. One thing I just really want to always emphasize as we go through some technical assistance stuff, make sure that if you really are getting frustrated with the database, that you do reach out, you click on that need technical assistance, or use the emails that are in your chat and get in touch with us, because we want to help you make sure that you're entering data easily, not stumped by the database. If there's a bug that you found, it happens. Our database is getting updated all the time. If you have feedback on the database, we'd love to hear from you. I think that really gets to all of my checkbox items for our webinar today. Were there any questions from our attendees? None?
Not that I've seen.
Okay. I want to show you some of the potential for, let's say, if you are, now this is not available to you as a volunteer. These query functions are available to our program trainers, which is awesome, and they are available to us as a state team. So let's say you work for Aiken County, which is a real example in this for today. So, and you want to look at so we're at one thing about troubleshooting too, if you are sending an email to Emily or I, and you want to tell us what's going on, always include a screenshot, the whole screen. Most importantly, the URL for that screen. Include that and send that to us so we can see what you're seeing. So if I wanted to see, was there an alert triggered in the past 6 months in Aiken County, I can look at what happened there, what the E. coli is, what the conditions were. I can go back to that event and chase down that event and learn more. If I want to see how many sites, so if I work for a watershed organization and I want to see how many sites were sampled in the past year, or how many sites we have, in our watershed, I can search that information. So that's why that HUC8 is truly important. It's the only way within the database that we can geographically really search for watershed events, or by watershed, I wanted to look up a site that maybe have a few data points here. Yeah, 15 data points. So this is what we call, again, the site profile page. There's 2 groups that monitor this site, a description, which is super helpful. All the photos, fairly soon as we start to really grow as a program, these photos are going to be in a hyperlink so that you don't have to deal with your page loading, and you can choose to open them in another tab versus having to wait for them to load as you get down to the data. So we'll look at DO and water temperature. Always love to see, is this working for us? Are we seeing this inverse, this inverse relationship between DO and water temperature? Are we seeing water temperature having an impact on E. coli? Again, pretty soon this will get a little bit more fancy, but congratulations to this group. What a great amount of data that they're already collecting just over these past 2 years. Just checking the chat to see if there's any other messages here.
No, not just yet.
Okay. Emily, is there anything that I missed that you want to add?
I don't think so. I think you've covered everything that I could think of.
Okay. One downside for y'all is we go back and forth on this. In this screen, you can't see, when you're on the site profile page, you will not see if there's another site downstream or upstream from your station. You have to end up going back to the big map to find that out. So if you're using that screen for that purpose, it won't show you that data. It's only rigged to show you and wired to show you just your site for this site profile page, because right here it has that 1450. Again, the database is really more reliant on those numbers than that front name, the S for Salkehatchie in this case. It's looking for that number. Let's just quickly go back to how do we get to the database. So from scadoptastream.org, which converts to this Clemson address, hopefully you all are signed up for our e-news on the homepage. Subscribe to our newsletter. We have, I think, 2,800 people now that receive this newsletter, which is amazing. We want to see that number continue to grow. Hopefully, so you're on the C-News, you're getting updates. You want to go ahead and enter data. You're going to our database. That opens in a new page. Also, just before we leave, want to show you that there is an FAQ site, and it is very long. So that's why we have these pluses and minuses, so you can condense it, and you can go through and sort. If you are having problems that we haven't solved today and you don't feel like emailing us, you're doing this at 2 a.m. for some reason, and you just want to finish your data entry, this FAQ page is available to you. All right. Well, I really want to thank everyone for taking the time to be here today. Not only that, but also taking the time to contribute to our watershed and the citizen science program in South Carolina. It is a very relevant program, and you're part of a very large community now actively monitoring our state's waterways. You can see by this map, we are growing by leaps and bounds. If there's anything we can do to help support you, and we are there, please email us, connect with us on social media, as well as if you have been volunteering for a while and you just love this program and want to share it with others. We are always interested in helping in finding new trainers to be part of our core team. Without trainers, we really couldn't do this work. You are our messengers, our energy sources across the state. So if you love this program, you feel like you can give a good presentation and you love to sample with other people and show them how to sample, email us and let us know if you're interested in becoming a trainer. Where there's trainers, there's monitoring events, and you can see we still have some gaps to fill so that we can make this program accessible for all of our residents across the state. We are truly committed to providing that high-level program for everyone. So I really want to thank you again for taking the time to be here. It's been a pleasure to walk through the database with you. Please let Emily and I know if there's anything we can do to help you in your monitoring journey.